Well, I'm doing something here that I haven't done in a while, and that is a book review. I figured I may as well try my hand at it again, just for fun, and to see, I don't know, what kind of response I'd get from it, and really just to get back into the whole swing of things. My last book I reviewed, I believe, was Beyond the City by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which was quite a long time ago, and I found that to be an okay book. Unfortunately, I just got done reading a book, and I'm very sad to say that it was not a very good one. The book in question is this: November by Gustave Flaubert, the author of the very famous Madame Bovary. I've not read Madame Bovary yet, but after this I'm sort of scared too. So, what is this book about? Well, I've read the book, but I still don't know. It says here, in this moving evocation of adolescence, Flaubert draws from his own experiences to describe the ecstasy of long-awaited sensual pleasure. Basically, I guess it's like a sexual awakening or other type of a story. That's what it says back here. The actual story, oh my god. The writing in this book, you can see it's a very thin book. It's no more than 130 pages. Took me 2 days to read. But the writing in this book is just so ungodly purple, so excessive. There's a bunch of navel staring, or navel gazing. That's what it is. There's a bunch of navel gazing in this, and this main character goes on and on and on and on and on about, being a virgin, and I suppose how everything, I guess, arouses him. And I mean everything. It doesn't matter if it's like a horse passing in a carriage, or like a leaf falling swiftly to the ground. Everything in here turns him on. I mean, Jesus Christ. It's obvious that this main character is a chronic masturbator because just of how much utter fluff and needless, like I said, navel gazing in here about nothing. It gets away from the whole story, which the story isn't really all that much. The story is about, I guess, his encounter with a prostitute, who is his first love, and how, she never really had a love before, and neither did he, and they were meant for each other. I'm not going to spoil the ending, because really, or you know what, maybe I will, because there is no reason why anybody should read this. They don't stay together, and thankfully, he ends up dying at the end when trying to revisit the town that she is from. I mean, there's a whole bunch of weird, long tangents going on about nothing. Like, India and Egypt and a whole bunch of other stuff that is so... This book could have been cut down at least by 3/4, and it still could have worked. And it's creepy too, because he even describes how he would want himself to be a woman and how he would love himself. I don't know, it's strange, meandering dreck. People might ask if I'd ever do a video about Christian. This book, if Christian had any sense and a functioning brain, I could very well see him writing something like this, or she, or whatever the hell he is now, writing something like this. This is just the absolute worst. And the title November, there is no mention of November whatsoever in this book. There's autumn, there's December, but there is no November. It's ridiculous. And a whole bunch of unnecessary crap all chocked into this one little tiny book. My sign language teacher once said that the longest short book that she's ever read was Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. Heart of Darkness is an absolute masterpiece. To this day, ever since I read it when I was 16, passages continue to echo in my mind. We could not understand because we were too far, and could not remember because we were travelling in the night of first ages. Of those ages are gone, leaving hardly a sign in our memories, and then so on and so forth. And that book, you can argue, went off in plenty of long tangents, but actually the book itself focused a lot on, those tangents tied into the terror of the situation, the tenuous divide between civility and savagery, and just everything that makes that book so great. This here, you get none of that. This book here is the worst book I read. The worst book I've ever read probably would be Albert Camus' The Stranger. And not for its writing, not for its story, those were all fine. It just put me in a very somber mood, and I'm already very morose most occasions. I find it very difficult to be happy, and to have read that book and to have made me so depressed was just horrible, and I actually had to read it for a class. This book is probably the worst written, poorly executed novel ever written, or that I've read. And Flaubert wrote this at 20. I'm 19. My first novel is about my experiences with a woman, much like this, but I don't go off into 20-page, you can see how long these paragraphs are, long tangents, talking even about, like it's trying to, I want to say even there was something about him trying to become a poet or something in here, but it's all lost in translation, all lost in all of this sort of viscous, inextricable smut that populates this book. That this book, for once in my life, made me feel, ideally, the mark of a great book should make you feel as though you're not reading it. It should make you feel as though you're experiencing it, as though you're opening up an amphitheater in your mind. That's the cosmos of the mind. The amphitheater in the brain and such, as though you're experiencing it like it were a sort of stage production or movie or something like that. This here, it felt like, yeah, I was reading the text on these pages here, but that was all I was doing. And it made me daydream too. I could be doing so many other things, reading so many other books. I could be reading Roberts and Davies's A Mixture of Frailties, which I hope to be my next book. I desperately want to read this one. I could have been reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which desperately needs to be read. I could have read anything by Patrick White, anything by J.M. Coetzee, anything by anybody. And this book, for once, made me think that I would rather be doing something else, like, going outside for a walk, or watching YouTube, or doing something that is frivolous, unproductive, just something that did not engage the mind whatsoever. It was that bad. And it tries to have some poetical passages in here. Let me tell you. Let me see if I can find some stuff. So poetic passages in here, like when, for instance, when the main character leaves the, what's it called? The prostitute, and thinks about her for several days. He talks mainly about going off to some place, to see the world. But that's all he talks about, seeing the world. It gets to the point to where, I can find the bloody thing, the point to where in a cedar wood canoe, a long canoe with paddles so slim that they seem like feathers, that's unnecessarily poetic. Beneath a sail of plaited bamboos, to the sound of tom-toms at the tambourines, it's hard to read even. I will go to that yellow land they call China. You can hold the women's feet in one hand. They have tiny heads, thin eyebrows. That curve at the corners. They live in arbors and green reeds and eat velvet-skinned fruits from painted porcelain. The mandarin, pointed moustache falling to his chest, head shaven, pigtails dropping low on his back, round fan between his fingers. And it goes on and on about stuff that is unimportant to the reader and tries to be poetic. I read another book that had a sort of poetical bent to it, and that was David Malouf's Jono. Excellent book. One of the best I've ever read this year. I might consider reading it again sometime. This is a great book. I recommend it to anybody and everybody. I'm surprised I haven't done a review on it. I might reread it within the next few weeks. I don't know. But this book is far more poetical and actually does things right. And doesn't get caught up in long tangents talking about frivolity and straying away from the main narrative and such. And there's actually quite a lot of story in this one. There's about as much story in here as there is on this note card. Horrible book. Do not read it under any conditions. It's funny because this book, I tore a page accidentally. You can see kind of there. And I didn't give a damn, because I really don't plan to ever read this book again. It was that horrible. Insufferable. But this book, I recommend this to no one. If Ahab, if you're watching this, if you want a prime example of, overwritten garbage, and there's a difference between when people criticize Lovecraft and how florid and bloated his prose tend to be. He does that for a reason. He does it to emphasize the horror of, the insanity of the human condition, or I suppose the horror of the unseen monsters and the unknown that he's describing in his fiction, and does it very well, and does it with actually some very appropriate, seldom used words. The difference between the verboseness of Lovecraft and the verboseness of Flaubert is that Lovecraft I actually enjoy reading. And it's sad that when your work is brought through to a professional editor, and when they say, you need to reduce the adjectives by half, or by a third, or by 2/3, or if not 2/3, it's sad that that's looked down upon, because Lovecraft did it so well. I see now why publishers want your work to be more streamlined, because of shit like this. November, Gustave Flaubert. Do not read it. In fact, I'm just going to toss it over to the side and get rid of it, probably. Well, I sincerely hope that Madame Bovary is much better. I don't know when I'll read it. Probably won't be for a few years, because I gotta forget that rubbish. But anyway, that's all. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've actually suffered through the horrible dreck that is November. And I will see you all very soon. And I'll be back maybe sometime with another book review. Hopefully one that will be much more positive, and that will actually be of a book that I very much enjoyed reading. Alright. Have a good evening.